Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host, and my guest today is Shaina Bilow. Hi, Shaina.
Hi, Irina. How are you?
Good. So I want to ask you about your designing thing, and I'll tell you like why it's fascinating to me because like there is a lot of people who are knitters, and there are a lot of people who play around with the existing pattern and they make adjustments, but like at what point did you decide that you are a designer? Like how, what was the day? Do you remember that?
Well, that's so funny. So I remember when I was first getting interested in the math of knitting, it was because my shoulders are pretty narrow, and I would have a very hard time fitting sweaters. So I would take existing sweater patterns and adjust them to get my right shoulder measurements. So that's when I was starting to tinker with the idea of the math of knitting and how sweaters are constructed and things like that. And then let's see, when did I become a designer? My friend gave me a huge pile of yarn, um, I guess like 18 years ago, 17 years ago, that he didn't want anymore. And I started playing around with how to put it together in different ways to create a sweater. And so I don't know if I could be called a designer at that point, but the curiosity sparked in me of how can I create something out of this yarn? What does this yarn say? And how can I let it speak? So, oh gosh, yeah, I don't know that exact moment. That's such a fabulous question.
No,
Um,
I'm just like
I,
I'm wondering like when, because like a lot of people do some adjustments, right? Or even like they take yarn and they just play with it and see what's coming out of it. But it's a different level of confidence to announce to the world, here, this is my design, right? Like, do you remember at the beginning, like, were you questioning if those were actually your designs or if you just changed somebody else's design?
very beginning. So I only opened my Ravelry store, let's say, about 10 years ago. But I had been designing prior to that at my store. I owned a yarn shop, and people would come in and they would come up with an idea. And they would say, I want a pullover sweater with a cable and a this. And suddenly sparks would just start flying, and I'd start sketching up ideas. Um, so I guess, yeah, at that point, when I owned my shop with my mother and my sister, at that point was when I guess I would consider myself a designer, because people would come in with a problem, right? The problem is, I want a sweater, I need something, and I'm not finding exactly what I need, or my fit is not just right with whatever is out there already. And then I would solve that problem by designing for them. I don't know that I ever called myself a designer. And even still, it's like a little funny to say that. Um, but yeah, that when does that bridge happen? I mean, I haven't reinvented a cardigan here. I haven't reinvented a pullover, but I've put my own twist on the actual design of it. I mean, our yeah, I mean, there are some designers out there that make incredibly unique pieces. Like Zandy Peters is amazing with the way her mind works, and she created that stitch. I love Nora Gone. There are some really incredible designers that I think are completely unique. My approach to design is just having fun and enjoyment of knitting and making something that you will wear and love and enjoy the process of. So, yeah, I don't know that I had that moment of saying I'm formally a designer. It just has come naturally that that I've enjoyed putting together projects for people, and I just love yarn and knitting. So.
So when you just started being a designer, how did you promote your things? Was it difficult to find that audience?
It In a way, yes. So when I started designing, it was when I owned a yarn store. So I had an automatic audience. Anyone who walked into the store could see the pieces that I had designed hanging up and knit them themselves. And then they had my guidance throughout, which was very nice. So when we closed our shop and I transitioned to working online and working as a teacher privately with a lot of my old customers, um, it was an automatic audience there, but it was a small audience. So when I started expanding a little bit more, I think a lot of what helped me expand was social media. I would start posting videos like my tiny tutorials that I post on YouTube. I post them on Instagram. And I think people feel comfortable knowing that I am the type of designer that offers some videos too of how to do certain techniques, that I have a keen interest in learning and helping people understand how to do knitting techniques. It's not just a matter of scratching something on a paper, saying it's my design and knit it. I have the background in teaching people that I think adds to that. So specifically, I don't know other ways that I've reached out for an audience. I'm not the best at promotion or self-promotion. So it's sort of people are taking classes with me now that we've been doing all these online workshops and things, and I've been getting out a bit more to some larger events. And I think people are getting to know me as a teacher and then kind of curious about my designs and finding me there. So it's a nice way to get to know people. Yeah.
How did you get into teaching? What was your first teaching gig? Do you remember that?
Oh, my first teaching gig. Yeah, it was at the store I worked at in New Jersey. The first shop I worked in while I was I was in college and working at this yarn store, and I taught a sock workshop. And I think one person showed up for the workshop, and maybe my sister, and I taught them how to knit socks. And that was my first, formal paying gig for actually teaching. And from there, it just went on. But I've always been a born teacher. It's something I've wanted to do. I've wanted to teach since I was a child. It's been a passion of mine. So but I've also wanted to be a designer. So the knitting business is this, like what I'm doing right now is all of my dreams fulfilled. It's really wonderful. I had intended to be a math teacher, like a middle school math teacher, but I love what I'm doing now.
So when you teach, like you walk into that class, are you nervous?
No, it is so funny. It's real, like 2 years ago, my dear friend got sick and asked me to fill in for him at Vogue Knitting Live. And leading up to the event, I was very nervous because I hadn't taught in one of those huge settings on the national level yet. And I got there and it just clicked. It all felt right. I walked into the classroom, not a single butterfly. I knew what I was talking about. I was able to, it just felt right. Which is so funny because I tend to be a bit of a nervous, shy person, like if I go to a party or something, I get a little shy, but with knitting, there's just so much connection and so much to talk about and so much that I feel confident in my knowledge of. So,
well, do you ever like question your expertise? Do you ever think, well, what if these people in this class are like way more experienced and knowledgeable about things I'm talking about than I am, and they're going to ask me some question and trip me and I wouldn't know the answer? Like, does that ever cross your mind?
I don't. I love it when I have different skill levels in a class because it really helps me. It challenges me as a teacher, and I end up getting to learn more as a result. So I'm always on a quest for knowledge with knitting, and I love questions in knitting classes. I love learning how people learn and what they're curious about in terms of our knitting techniques. So for me, it's never a fear of mine. And also I found typically if I'm advertising a class that's, a beginner level brioche or, typically people, the very experienced knitters would be going into a more challenging class. They would find themselves in a different type of workshop. But it never bothers me to have somebody in the class who is an experienced knitter. So.
Right. Do you ever get inspired by things that happen in the class, like by seeing somebody or by talking about something or by some questions that are being asked?
Oh, all the time. All the time. It's amazing. So I've been teaching a little bit virtually, and in some of my classes, I'll demonstrate to people how I design on my charting program. I'll open that screen up and design a little bit. And often, as I'm just doodling around with everybody in the class, some new design, some new stitch pattern will appear, and it's amazing. So I've been saving a lot of those. But even in classes, students will ask me questions about my design that make me rethink perhaps, oh, I could add a pocket here, or what's another way to do this technique, or perhaps I could add short rows for better fit. Like there are all these different, and yeah, they're completely inspirational to work with knitters. It really is.
Right. how does usually it happens that you come up with the design idea? Because you're also like so prolific in the amount of designs you put out there. So are you like disciplined, planned person that you have like next month I'm gonna come up with this many designs and I'm gonna work on this or that, or it's just like all sporadic?
I laugh because I want to be a disciplined person who has a schedule. But no, it's really sporadic. Um, I, it's very sporadic. It's when I can get enough work done at night or during the day that I can get a lot of patterns put out. Um, so I wish I had that discipline. I know a lot of designers are very good about setting the plan and having everything go in motion to get a pattern released. So I'm a little more shooting from the hip on that, which I'm not so comfortable with. But someday I'll get into a routine. Maybe. I mean, it's only been what 10 years. Maybe someday I'll get into some routine.
There's hope.
Yes. But in terms of coming up with the designs, I'll often be laying in bed and just something, a construction technique pops into my head, or something I saw somebody wearing walking down the street will just not disappear. And I have a sketchbook that I keep next to my bed and I jot things down. Or when I'm in the shower, it's when I'm not supposed to be thinking about design that they just bubble up. So I have a book that I defer to if I'm ever feeling like, oh, I got a great yarn. What can I knit with it? I go into my book and I find something perfect.
So like what comes first, like the chicken or the egg sort of thing? Is there first an idea and then you find the yarn for it, or you see the yarn and you're like, okay, what is gonna be?
Usually it's I have the idea and then I find the yarn. But occasionally a yarn will just scream at me what it needs to be knit. So this one, the other way. So this one here, my friend dyes yarn that is really multicolored and wild. And looking at that yarn, I said, I need to show off each and every stitch. So that design came about because the yarn needed to be knit a certain way to show off the really awesome dye technique. And then I recently got a bundle of yarn from Joshua at Blue Fiber Company. And that I sent him an idea and I said, I really have this great idea. Your yarns would be amazing. And so so we worked on that together. So both ways, but typically I have the idea first and then the yarn comes later, but sometimes the yarn just speaks. So
how do you choose what yarn dyers to work with? Like, is that more personal connection because you like the personality of a dyer, or is that the quality of their yarn or the uniqueness of the colors? Like what catches your attention?
The uniqueness of the colors. I am so in love with color. I find it therapeutic. Color. My house is very colorful. And so for me, color is a big deal. If there's a dyer whose aesthetic is very whose color combinations don't work with my aesthetic, I wouldn't go out of my way to reach out to them. So I typically like very bold and vibrant colors, but even some softer colors I love too. So it really has to do with me appreciating that dyer's sense of color theory, I suppose. Yeah. Yarn quality is not a major issue to me. Like that's not the thing I necessarily go for, but I'm super excited for this with the cashmere in it. That's going to be luscious.
His yarn is just unbelievable.
I know. And I know you recently had a birthday, happy birthday, but you recently had the birthday giveaway. So yeah, that yarn is awesome. And your color's gorgeous. So yeah, typically it's just whoever will work with me. So
yeah. Well, you mentioned your dream of being a math teacher. So I'm assuming you're good at math.
I'm okay.
Right. So when it comes to tech editing, when it comes to grading of the sweaters, let's say, were you self-reliant? Like, are you using different tech editors now from when you started? Like, what was that progress?
So at the beginning, I just did my own tech editing. And then I have a 4.5-year-old son who keeps me very busy. And I was realizing that I wasn't getting enough patterns published, for my own, that I wanted to have published because I didn't have the time to do all the tech editing. So I did have a tech editor for a while. Lately, I've been doing it a bit on my own. Still, again, now I've found a little more time. I love the math aspect. So I have these amazing spreadsheets that I use to write the patterns. My tech editor laughs at me because they are so intense with all the numbers. But I tend to do it on my own for the most part. And I use Excel and I do all the grading sizes. Lately, I've been doing extra small to 5X for sweaters. So yeah, it varies. Sometimes it's nice. Often it's nice to have another set of eyes on the pattern. So that's where the test knitters come in handy too. But I would definitely recommend to anyone starting out in design to have a tech editor if you're not confident with the math. But yeah.
So when it comes to test knitters, talk about like your dream test knitter. Who would make like an ideal test knitter for you?
A quick knitter with with nice photography skills, because for me it's a lot about seeing that finished piece and knowing that it came out in such a way that the person is happy with it. So quick knitting, photography skills are a plus. Communication is great too, asking if there's something that doesn't make sense to let me know, of course. And then occasionally a test knitter finds a little, a typo or something, a math error that, if I wrote 39 instead of 93 or something bizarre. So yeah, I mean, attention to detail is great too. But yeah, just a passion for knitting is really what I like for test knitters, passion for knitting. So
Is it hard for you to find, like, because you're so inclusive in sizing, is it hard to find testers for every size?
oh, for sure. Yeah, I typically get testers for the second size. So that would be sort of the small through the large or extra large. Those are usually where I get test knitters. So often I'm just comfortable with that. At one point, maybe I will be so famous as a designer that I'll have people lining up to test every single size, and that would be wonderful. In the meantime, if someone has a question about sizing, if they are making one of the larger sizes that hasn't been tested or the smallest size, certainly they can reach out and I'd be happy to offer suggestions if the fit needs to be tweaked or something. So,
Right.
yeah.
Do you have a favorite class to teach?
Oh, I really love the fixing mistakes class that I teach, because it really empowers knitters to take charge of their own knitting and to look at the stitches in a different way. And by that same token, I also really love teaching knitwear finishing, so mattress stitch, how to put sweaters together, because I've helped so many students with sweater patterns and knitting designs from other designers. And I always chuckle because some people will bring me patterns where you're doing a provisional cast on, short rows, picking up stitches, doing all this jumping through hoops to avoid a shoulder seam, to avoid a simple shoulder seam. I find it hilarious that designers are doing this. I mean, seams add structure, they add definition, they keep your sweaters together forever. So I don't want any knitter to be afraid of seams. And that's why my finishing class is also a favorite. But I have lots of other technique classes that are fun. Also, my hat design class, I really love teaching too. My design your own knitted hat class is fun because I think it gives, even if people don't want to become a designer or design a lot more hats or whatever, it gives them a taste for how all the numbers work together with knitting. Yeah. So
Oh,
any class. Yeah.
do you feel like everybody can be a designer?
No. No, I don't think so. And that's okay. Yeah, I don't think so. It's just some people, I don't know. I don't know how I want. Some people, everyone can try. Certainly, anyone and everyone can try. And definitely now that it's that the knitting world is such where you can publish a pattern to Ravelry and it could be anything. You could, and same as like YouTube channels with the tutorials. I'm sure we've all seen tutorials from just any random person can put a video up saying they know how to do a certain increase or decrease, and you just have to trust that they're doing it right. And I think it's the same with design. I come from a background, I've been in the industry for 20 years, teaching, designing, writing patterns, helping people with patterns. I have a huge knowledge base. So I feel fairly confident in my skills, and I want everyone to feel confident, and hopefully anyone starting out in design or teaching does. But yeah,
Oh,
not
then okay. So
yeah.
if not everybody is a born designer, do you think everybody can learn how to knit?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yes, 100%. 1000% yes. Everyone can knit and everyone should knit, I think. It's so relaxing and fun. As you know, I mean, we're here together because we knit and we love it. But yeah, I think everyone can knit. I have had, in my experience owning a yarn shop, teaching in yarn shops, I've taught many people how to knit. I think there was maybe only one or two times where it just wasn't going to work out. That person just wasn't ready somehow. I would have worked and worked and worked with them, but they just didn't want to go further in learning. So yeah, I think anyone who wants to knit definitely can.
I wonder like your opinion on that. So sometimes I meet knitters who've been knitting since they were like 3 years old and they're like in their 70s and all they ever knit is like socks or hats and it's like it's all stockinette and this is what makes them happy, right? And then I meet some guys like let's say Steven Weber from New Jersey also. So he started to knit just relatively recently and suddenly he jumps into like every difficult technique and he'll like try every difficult design and he'll like dabble in designing himself. Like they're like all sort of like this unstoppable knitters, people
Yes.
who like progress through different techniques, different styles of knitting, like seemingly effortlessly. Do you feel like it's all fine? Like do you feel like people should challenge themselves? Do you feel like it's fine to just knit stockinette of your own your life, like if it makes you happy?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Totally. I love when I have a beginner knitter who doesn't know any better and I say to them, "Oh yeah, you can knit that cabled sweater." Sure. And they just jump right in and do it. I think it all comes from our own personalities and what we want to get out of knitting. So some of us really want, like, there are some of us who would just take a stroll down the street next to a lake and be happy, and then others who want to climb Mount Everest. And so, I think it's the same with knitting. There's some of us who just want to keep challenging and learning and discovering. And I think those types of people make the best designers too. When you want to just keep discovering. And then there are other people who are so happy to knit 1,000 garter stitch shawls or, just stockinette stitch socks over and over and over. And that's what brings them joy. And I think that's amazing. I think it's wonderful. It's all wonderful.
Do you ever get creative blocks? Do you ever getting frustrated with like lack of ideas?
Sometimes, yes. Yeah, I get into a funk where it maybe isn't like, say, a big rainy cloud over me altogether. It's maybe more specific to a yarn I have or specific to a design that somebody has asked me to do, where there's like this exterior pressure almost. It's not just a blank slate where I get to create as I would like to. I kind of have to work within parameters, and sometimes that blocks me a little. Yeah.
Do you ever get frustrated from like putting pressure on yourself of like, do you feel like there's this external expectation of you because you're a designer to pop out those designs like again and again and again, and each one has to be more creative and different and unique, and like does that stress you out?
Oh, yeah. Yes, for sure it does. I'm super hard on myself in general. And I always feel like I need to be productive. I mean, these are just things about my personality. So yeah, I give myself a hard time, and I'm trying to learn how to be a little bit more kind to myself and say, wow, you published that pattern and it's really great. And to also say to myself, just do it, just get it out there, show the world what you've got. But I find it very overwhelming. Or, I mean, now with social media, our pictures of our knits have to be that much more powerful. and eye-catching. They have to make somebody stop scrolling past them, right? Same on, when you put a pattern up on Ravelry or Face, anywhere you're putting a pattern. So that adds some more challenge to the job, is setting aside the time to do my makeup, to get a photographer, to go out somewhere and actually take the pictures. So yeah, there's a lot that overwhelms me about it, but I really wouldn't have it any other way. Like, I love designing.
So Ravelry, let's talk about like that, right? So on one hand, it opens so many doors for new people who would never be designers, who we would never know, because it's so easy to post your design on Ravelry nowadays. And so anybody who has any idea can just post it there, right? On the other hand, like, it used to be that in order to get somebody's pattern, you would have to buy a book. So there were like all these like big names of people who would publish books of their knitting. Nowadays, it's like there's thousands of designers. So, like, I feel like every time I'm scrolling through my feed, I'm like, is there anybody who is not a designer? It's like, it almost feels like that, right?
Yes.
How difficult it is for you to stand out in this like amount of designers around you?
It's challenging. Yeah, it is, for sure. Also because I'm not outrageously outgoing. So yeah, it's a little tricky for me to navigate that, to stand out and to put myself out there. Yeah, but I mean, I'm hoping that when people are scrolling through their feeds and maybe one of my designs pops up, that my work speaks for itself in a way, that I don't, that people see the design and they say, oh, that's just what I was looking for. Or that looks like a neat construction, or I love the colors that designer chose. And then I am able to attract them that way. But it is tricky to stand out and to constantly have to feel the need to keep publishing and keep putting out and producing.
Well, how much do you think about it?
Oh, knitting and design?
Of that pressure to how to make yourself to stand out, and how to make yourself different from everybody else, and how to make your designs unique. Like, is that something that keeps you up at night?
Creative ideas keep me up at night. I've been waking up randomly at like 3 a.m. and my mind is just whirring with ideas. Sometimes for a group I work with in my town, and other times for knitting. But I know the like beating myself up a little bit about not feeling like I'm the best, or whatever it is, those kind of self-doubt type things, those don't keep me up. They just push me forward, and they force me to say, all right, well, just put out another design, knit what makes you happy, put it out there in the world, and see who else is going to be happy as a result of it.
Do you have like any patterns that you regret designing, that you like, oh, like, should have just skipped that idea and moved to the next? Like, is there anything that disappoints you in your designs? Like,
yeah. I won't say which ones, but yeah, there are a few where I'm like, I really could have, that one could have been scrapped. Really, that didn't need to make it to the design floor. I mean, and usually they're the ones that people aren't buying anyway. And I never know what to do about that. Do I just erase them from the history of Ravelry in my life, or leave them up there and maybe it'll fill a need for somebody? But yeah, yeah.
Have you ever, on the other side of the spectrum, right? Have you ever designed something that you thought was, like one of your best work, and you were like super proud of the design, and it just didn't perform as you expected?
Definitely, yes. And I think often that has to do, I often blame myself for that. Like, oh, I didn't promote it enough. All these things that I could have done to improve the release of it. And then often I'll rework the piece and then kind of do a re-release with the newly knit version. So the same pattern, just worked again a couple years later in a new yarn, and kind of re-release it that way, when I know it's a design that has a lot of when it's a design that I know should have done better, that I know really would appeal to more people than the number of people that decided to knit it or what have you. Right. So yeah, that happens.
You know what I wonder? Like, sometimes I notice, like, if I would test knit for somebody, the testers would put out their pictures and people would often respond better to the pictures of the testers than the original colors the designer used. I mean, it's not always happening, but it happens. Do you have that experience that like you would make something and it doesn't perform great in one color combination, but then you release it in another color combination and suddenly people like discover it?
Yes. And I find people really respond well to seeing test knitters photos anyway, just because it's a real human, right? I'm a human, obviously, and I knit my sweaters and whatever, but it's different when you have somebody out who's not the designer and not the test sample knitter making the sweater and showing off their beautiful work. It's a totally different connection that people make with that sweater. But right now I have a design. It'll be coming out soon. Actually, it's like a scrap yarn sweater made with like all odds and ends, right? So here's mine. It's like a cardigan with all these different yarns. And I loved it so much, I knit it in 2 colorways. But I have my test knitters working on it right now. Their colors are blowing me away. Like one of the test knitter, like there are so many sweaters. I'm looking at them and I'm like, I need to reknit this. I need to make a 3rd one. These are amazing. So I think the more the merrier. When you have so many projects showing on Ravelry and Instagram and whatever, people can really see just how versatile and special a design is. So that's why test knitters are amazing. And that's why having people post projects when they finish them, even if they're not a test knitter, even if it's like 10 years later after I've published a pattern, it's really nice to see it because it's always a new interpretation.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have like, when you work, let's say in summer, right? Do you work on seasonal things? Like is summer only like light kind of fingering shawls and winter is all worsted? Like, do you do that seasonal thing or you do what you feel like at the moment?
I try to stick to seasonal, and I think that was sort of ingrained in me from my yarn shop days. When we would get the new yarns for fall in August, we would start knitting all the winter yarns. And when we would get the new yarns in February for spring and summer, we would start knitting all of those as samples. And just to follow the lead of the fashion industry, yes, that's how I tend to do it. So I'm going to release more bulky knits, like my chunky vest, like more
I love
bulky
that
knits.
vest, by the way.
Thank you. It's so fun. More bulky knits right now and cozy things. And then in the spring, summer, it's more shawls and lightweight items, typically. But as I mentioned before, I'm not incredible at planning, so I'm often knitting the same season that I'm designing for. And instead of, I know a lot of really wonderful designers plan months ahead, and they'll be knitting their winter garments in summer so that they're all ready for release in the winter. But
do you ever knit other people's designs?
it's been a long time since I have. And I think just because my time is so precious, I want to make sure I'm using it most efficiently for my work when I'm knitting. But I do have some yarn that I have put aside for what is that sweater? I think it's Tin Can Knits, the one that everyone does, the top down with the lace on the yoke.
Right.
So I mean, I have the desire to knit other people's designs now and again, but then I often just find myself without the time that I feel like I can justify. It would be a real treat to do it. Yeah.
Are you disciplined with yarn purchases? Like, are you buying only for like what's coming?
Yes, question. I don't know. I just went to Sheep Mole Festival. And I was wandering around and I didn't buy much. I bought a big bundle of yarn after I saw a sweater and got an idea for, a new sweater. And so I bought yarn for that. I typically buy yarn with a purpose. Yeah, I typically buy it with a purpose, unless it's something out of this world that I know I need. And then I usually will come up with a purpose at that point. I'll be like, this looks like a sweater to me. Let me get enough for a sweater. Or this looks like it would be great in a shawl or this or that. And then those yarns that I buy randomly that I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with, or I just bought one skein, those are what was perfect for this sweater. I bought this yarn a few years ago at Sheep and Wool Festival. It was a pack of all different colors, and so it worked perfectly for that sweater.
Do you like going to the festivals?
I do. I do. It's nice. The energy is nice to see all the different knitters and what they're wearing. And I mean, Sheep and Wool Festival is just so beautiful in New York because of the foliage, and I love apple pie, and I just love that time of year and being outdoors and being surrounded by yarn and other knitters. So yeah.
Do you get inspired there? Like you walk in and you see all those people wearing all their Rhinebeck sweaters and stuff. Like, do you get inspired? Do you get ideas? Do you like
I do,
write them down
yeah.
immediately?
Right, like on the way home, I was like, oh, I should really next year I should plan to meet up with all my knitters on the hill. Like like that sort of stuff. I want the social aspect of it to come together a little more for me next year.
Right.
Um, Usually, I get my best ideas for design work after I've taught a class. When I'm feeling that sort of natural high of the enjoyment of the class and the teaching and feeling like I'm making a difference with people and their knitting, that's when the ideas start bubbling up for me, and my design book starts getting filled. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with anything we talked about in the class. I think it's more of my mood.
Right.
That just I'm opened up a little bit more to the idea. So I don't get that as much from Rhinebeck or from festivals, because I'm on overload there. I'm seeing so many sweaters, I'm seeing so much yarn, and it's just very overwhelming. It's fun but overwhelming.
So when you teach classes, do you remember those students like a year later, or is it all a blur? Like, are there people who you became friends with because you taught them?
There, I have some people, yeah, that I teach that I really enjoy and love, and I teach recurring classes too, where I'll see people, every week for however long they decide to knit with me. And then the bigger group classes where, say, I'm teaching for Vogue, or I'm teaching for Webs, or wherever I'm teaching. I'm terrible with names of people, but I do remember faces and projects. So I often will remember people's faces that they've been in a class with me before, and it's so mortifying that I can't remember the name. I've been loving Zoom because I see the name right next to the person's face. But yeah, so sometimes I'll remember. I will often remember a person's projects, or the type of class we worked on together, or the type of knitter they were. Yeah.
Do you have a sense of camaraderie with other designers, like especially because you're teaching and there are like other people who teach at Vogue, let's say? Is that like do you see them as your colleagues? Do you see them as your friends, or is it competition?
Not competition, certainly. I'm a little like starstruck when I meet some of them, to be honest. And I've recently made friends with a wonderful, lovely designer and teacher named Amy Snell. So she and I are working on some collaboration things together. But yeah, they're kindred spirits, right? Like they are. So the last in-person Vogue I did was right before we all started, quarantining. So I haven't had a chance to really connect with many more teachers in a way that I would like to. Yeah, for sure.
So who is your people? Like, who are your fans? Who are your friends in the knitting community?
Oh my gosh. My fans are the best fans. My fans are just wonderful knitters who want to learn and find joy with their projects. So yeah, people who are creative and love color and want to learn new stitches. Like, if I'm speaking broadly in that way, they're people who just enjoy knitting. Yeah.
But like, do you meet most people online? Like, how do you, like, if you think about your good knitting friends, right? Are those the
Yes.
virtual knitting friends, the
Yes.
real people that you've met in classes? Who are they?
So lately it's been a lot of virtual, but a few of my new virtual knitting pals, or knitting fans, I've met them in person now, and we've knit together, and it's been lovely. So So it's a mix, but I would say lately, just with the nature of the world at the moment, it certainly has been a lot of virtual, where I've met some wonderful people from Wisconsin and California um, and all over the country, who have become, names that pop up for me all the time when I think, who am I designing this for? Who's going to like this? Oh, so and so is going to love this design, and I can see this person knitting it in these colors. So
Do you
yeah.
do that a lot actually? Like when you design something, do you have specific audience in mind, or do you usually design just whatever idea comes to you?
It's I don't know that I think of specific person, except for certain designs I do. Usually it's for myself. Usually I think, what am I going to wear? Like, I wear jeans and t-shirts and sweaters. I'm a very casual kind of dresser. So what am I going to feel comfortable in? And and my hope is that there are just more people out there like me who
Right.
just want to wear. I feel so proud wearing a sweater, but I also feel cozy, and um, my dress feels a little bit elevated from the usual, sweatshirt. So
What happened to, like, I mean, you teaching for decade, and you designing for so long, and you knitting obviously for so long. What happened to all those items that you need? Like, do
oh
you
my
give them?
gosh.
Do you sell them? Do you wear them?
So when my shop closed in, what year was that? Oh, 2011, we sold a ton of samples, and there was one sweater that I regret selling. It was just a really beautiful marled sweater made in alpaca, and I'm actually re-knitting it right now for myself, another yarn. I'm finally biting the bullet and doing that. um, so a lot of my samples I'll loan out to local shops. If I know they have the yarn, I'll bring it over to the shop so that they can use. I've been toying with the idea of doing trunk shows where shops can get in touch with me, and then I would send my samples to them for, a month or a couple weeks so that they can show their customers. But yeah, I have just stacks and stacks of samples, and I did start listing a few things on my website. Samples that need to retire for whatever reason. I've listed them there, and one of the local yarn shops near me has a sample sale, so I bring things to her, because I can't just put things in a Goodwill bag and say goodbye. Like, I feel like so much love has gone into knitting them. They need to be appreciated, even if someone spends $5 on it at the yarn store as a sample. Like, there's still this appreciation of the craft that went into it.
Do you feel like, do you ever question your pricing? Like when you price your patterns and stuff, do you like, because it's like, it's such a common thing, like we all as crafters, we think that we know how much time goes into something, right? But then we feel guilty charging $7 for a pattern because it's so expensive.
um, I don't feel guilty charging for it, because on my editing, when I'm writing up my pattern and doing all the editing, I didn't realize this, there's a timestamp for the amount of time you spent editing and writing the pattern, and for the amount of time I spend working on these patterns to get them up to the snuff, to get them to the right level that I think they need to be at. I mean, hours and hours and hours. I don't even, $7, $8 doesn't cover it. Um, Despite my loving what I do, I need it to be something that can support me and my family. Um, so I don't feel guilty about it, but I do wonder sometimes. I say, is this that price point at which somebody is going to say, no way, I'm not buying that pattern, no way. And I certainly have my popular patterns, like I think that one, the splatter paint, is a popular one. So that pricing threshold might be at just the right spot. It is tricky coming up with the pricing, and I know there's been a lot of discussion amongst designers on um, kind of coming together to figure out what appropriate pricing would be. So it's yeah, it's a tricky rope to walk for
Right.
sure.
You think it's actually possible to make a living being a knitwear designer, or do you have to juggle like so many balls, like teaching and like, I don't even know, like
Yeah,
selling stuff, like how, because there's that many patterns you can publish a year, right?
right.
And the price point, as we just discussed, can be limited. So is it possible? Like,
there are some designers, I'm sure, out there who it's like almost being a rock star versus being the person like going and playing small gigs at the local bar. Um, so right now I'm playing small gigs at the local bar, which is nice. And yeah, I do have a lot of balls to juggle. I'm teaching, I do private lessons, I do group classes here, like on my porch. So I have a lot of balls to juggle to support this dream of mine, which is to just be involved in the knitting world and be creating for people who love knitting as much as I do. So yeah, it is possible, I'm sure. And I don't know at which point, like, is it a matter of amassing a huge collection of patterns for people, or is it a matter of finding just that one that speaks to thousands of knitters, and all of a sudden you've got, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So talking about rock stars, um, I was interviewing Stephen B. And of course, he spent like 2 years on the row with Stephen West, and so like we were talking about that, and he called those big designers like Stephen West, like Andrea Maury, that like everybody buying their patterns by like thousands. He called them the gatekeepers. Do you feel like they're the gatekeepers? Do you feel like having those massive like rock star designers that, like, if you look right now on Instagram, right, every other picture is the mystery knit along of Stephen West's shawl, right? Does that sort of like, do you feel like that prevents younger designers, less known designers from making it into a full-blown career? Or is it inspirational to have somebody like Stephen West?
So I mean, certainly I would be lying if I were to say there's not like a little bit of jealousy, right? That's not me. That like how incredible would it be, right? To release a pattern and have thousands of people immediately start knitting it. I don't know about the gatekeeper thing, but I mean, certainly it's tricky for designers like at my level, within my level, to break through. And I can't say that's the fault of anybody. Certainly as knitters, we have only so much time to dedicate to knitting, a week, a day, a month, whatever. Or maybe, if you were to break it down, maybe you're only knitting 10 things a year. Well, if 6 of those 10 things are from those big designers that everyone's knitting and your yarn shop is promoting and all of that, then yeah, you're people will be missing out on other designers that perhaps are not as well known. But again, it's that's just the way it goes with any business, right? Like there are the folks who have a huge, massive market share, and then those that have a little less. And there's a place for everybody. And certainly I would love to have more market share. It would be great. My husband would be thrilled. But yeah, and I would be thrilled. But I don't know how quite to get there. And that's amazing. I don't know if it's a timing issue, if they just popped in at just the right time. I mean, their designs are wonderful and lovely and amazing, and people love them for a reason.
But do you try to analyze like what makes them so successful? Like when let's say Stephen West comes out and he posts this video of like all these ballet dancers wrapped in his shawls and like this big makeup thing and doing some like bizarre little dance, and the world stops and observes. Like, do you try to think, okay, what shawl I'm gonna drape on me and my girlfriends and we're gonna perform the same dress? Like, do you try to get ideas of like how they market and what makes them so successful?
Yeah, I think I would be ridiculous if I were to do that. So yeah, I can't. I guess you have to have a certain personality to be able to to market in that way with the belly dancers and the shawls. And that's just not me. But people love that about Stephen West. People love the display and the excitement. It's certainly he certainly has quite the following for it. So good on him. And then yeah, I do try to analyze it, and and I think often what it is these designers have a very clear personality that comes through on their social media, on their, however they're communicating to their customers. and with all their pieces that they design, there's really a cohesive message that they have about who they are and the type of design that they do. So and it resonates with people or it doesn't. So, and I think for myself, I'm still trying to find that voice a little bit, and it might be for the rest of my life. I'm trying to find that voice because that's just me. So yeah, it's a lot to think about.
Well, you said that you're living your dream right now because you're knitting, you're designing, it's what you want, right? But is there more? Like, is there something that you have like one day I'll do that. Like one day I'll you know
My
reach to
big,
that.
yeah, my
Right.
big dreams. So one of my big dreams was to teach for Vogue Knitting Live, and I'm teaching for them now. I would love to write a book one day. I would love, yeah, sometimes I toy with the idea of opening a yarn store again, just like a nice, pleasant place, somewhere quiet, or even like an inn with a yarn store in it, so that people can come and stay at the bed and breakfast and then yarn shop and have a whole thing of it. So I have these like little dreams, but yeah, I think it's just to have for myself, I'd love to have more designs. I'd love to have a more structured design output. And yeah, I think that's where I would like to see my business go, and to have more teaching on the national level, to be going to yarn shops and teaching there, and big events on the West Coast and in the middle of the country. So those are some of the dreams. But right now I'm really living my dream. I get to design, I get to knit, I get to teach people. So I'm a lucky person. I am.
Is there a dream when it comes to your YouTube channel? And by the way, if you guys haven't yet subscribed to Shaina's YouTube channel, I'll put the description under the video. Please go and subscribe to her channel.
Thank you.
But
And
like,
on
do
that
you
note, make
have
sure to subscribe to Irina's
thank you.
channel.
But do you have any like ambitions for that channel?
Yeah, more videos. I would love to put up more videos. So my whole concept with my YouTube channel is quick videos that just show a technique in under a minute so that people can get back to their knitting. Often I've searched for videos on YouTube for clients of mine, and all of a sudden I'm seeing about this person's life. I'm hearing about the yarn that they're using because they were sponsored by somebody, and I don't have time for that. I want to be knitting. I don't want to be watching, a whole thing about that on a technique video. So anyway, I saw that as an opening in the market. And so I made these little videos. So my hope is to put up many, many more, connect them to my patterns so that people can easily find the techniques I'm talking about, and then build from there. Yeah. And of course, having more subscribers, having more people really enjoy my videos would be wonderful.
It's funny because I was just talking to Jacob. He was my last interview. So, I was talking to him, and he was like, I didn't even know that YouTube accounts exist. Like, so when you sent me your channel and you said, please subscribe to it, I was like, oh, like I can subscribe. And I feel like with YouTube, like that's the difficulty of it, because people just don't know about subscription. Like in Instagram or Facebook, you can follow somebody, right? It's
Exactly.
obvious. There's a culture of following somebody. You follow them, they follow you back. With YouTube, I feel like we're watching thousands of videos, but it doesn't even cross our mind to subscribe to them or like the video or write a comment. It's sort of just like, I just watch it because it's there, so it's harder to get subscribers on YouTube than to get followers on Instagram.
You're so right about that. You were absolutely right. And I'm the same way. I only realized recently with my own channel, I'm like, oh, wait, people are subscribing to me. That means they're going to see my videos. And with my son, he watches these videos about trucks. And so I now subscribe to them, and I subscribe to a workout person. And I'm like, oh, this is a whole new level of social media.
Right.
It didn't click for me for some reason. Yeah. So I totally agree with you.
Yes, so please subscribe.
Yes, please. Yeah, it's great because you'll get all the updates, and anytime we put up a new video, then you get that information about the video, and it's all very easy to search. So
well, thank you so very much for being on guest of my channel today. I loved having you over, and I loved our conversation. I got to know so much more about you.
Thank you. This was amazing being here with you, Irina. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Next time we'll move to yours.
Very good. Perfect. Thank
Thank
you.
you.